The Rayman series is one that I keep close to my heart. If you pull a random Rayman game off the shelf, you never know what you're gonna get. But despite this variety in the games, they always have a consistent level of quality and creativity that you just don't find in other series. That's why I never sold any of them. If you buy a Rayman game, you keep it for life. Except for Hoodlums Revenge, because as the FDA found, that game has a lethal dose of Hoodlums Revenge in it. Really should have warned you about this on the box. So hey, why not start with a game that isn't Hoodlums Revenge, but rather one that moved the series forward in a bold new direction. Rayman Bowling. Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, a strange evolution of the second game with a unique look, a dark comedy adventure story, and of course, more focus on combat. Man, I remember playing this for the first time. Like, after finishing Rayman 2, I just needed to have this as soon as I saw the commercials for it. I even got this demo disc, they gave it away with a box of cookies. I was hoping for more of the same, but immediately when I jumped into the first level, it was clear that this game is its own thing. For better or for worse. I mean, anybody who played 3D platformers in the GameCube, Xbox and PS2 era will know that when there was more focus on combat, that was kind of a red flag. Platforming and combat are difficult to mix. It can feel so disjointed going from platforming puzzles to beating up baddies in an enclosed arena. But ask any 3D platformer connoisseur and they'll tell you that this game got combat right. So what's so special about Rayman 3? I mean, what did the other games even do wrong? There are lots of examples, unfortunately. Note my extremely subtle implications by showing gameplay of Sonic Heroes in the background. Sonic fans, please keep your arms, legs and thundering rage inside until after the video ends, thank you. If enemies take a billion hits and constantly interrupt your flow, and avoiding combat altogether becomes the best strategy, that is not good combat! Look at games like Legend of Spyro or Pac-Man World 3, Sonic Unleashed, the SpongeBob games, even Rayman 2. Like, yeah, it's subjective, of course, and many of these games are still excellent, but too often did I feel this weird disconnect between the platforming and fighting. It's like a turducken, an undercooked different game inside of another game. Or maybe I'm just too used to giving myself food poisoning, I don't know. Apparently, combining these two is just hard. Unless you're Mario. Look at this, you jump on platforms, you jump on enemies, bada bing bada boom. Is this combat though? Before we dive into Rayman, we need to think about what combat even is. Some cool videos from NitroRad got me thinking about this, and I've always wanted to talk about it. Personally, I see combat in games more as a spectrum with various degrees of complexity, and some room for exceptions. On one side you have using enemies purely as platforming obstacles, on the other you have something like, I don't know, one of those side-scrolling Mortal Kombats, where the enemies have lots of health and require different combat strategies. Anyway, definitions and labels and spectrums aside, like Rayman 3 has more complex combat than your average platformer, and for games like this, it's the execution where it can either succeed or fall flat on its face. As you can see, Rayman's nose is still in perfect non-flattened shape, so clearly it stuck the landing somehow. I think there are 5 reasons why it managed to pull it off so well, which means I get to use jingles!
Reason 1. Shared actions.
Yeah, okay, let's start with the obvious one. The reason combat and platforming flow so well in Rayman 3 is because they are often seamlessly connected. Without even realizing it, sometimes you're fighting, sometimes you're puzzle solving, sometimes you're jumping on stuff. It's really well balanced in most cases. Now, whatever you're doing, it all feels like Rayman 3. And all your moves like running, jumping, charging your fists, targeting stuff, curving your punches, you use them everywhere. It's all connected, like exploring and finding teensy cages also extends your health meter, which is useful in combat too. All the basic mechanics are so versatile, and so far, yeah, this doesn't sound too different from Rayman 2's combat, but there's more to this, because this game introduced some new mechanics that affect both platforming, puzzle solving, exploration and combat, essentially tying them all together nicely, bringing me to
Reason 2. Shared power-ups.
The power-ups in Rayman 3 are really fun. Like, yeah, they're on a timer, sometimes they're very context sensitive. You know, sensitive to context, but it's not as rigid as something like Mario Galaxy, because you switch between them all the time, and finding them is a neat little puzzle of their own. The coolest thing about them is that you use them both in platforming and in combat. Now take the green one for instance, you can use it to activate platforms and take out certain enemies. You can also shrink them for some reason. Yeah, this is never useful, but it leaves them open to stupid one-liners. Yeah, why did you pick on somebody your own size? And oh, well, I appear to be dead. Well, this game sucks. I take everything back. Video cancelled. The same can be said for the other power-ups. Like with the shock rocket, you can activate a switch or snipe enemies from a distance. And with the lockjaw, you can swing from these thingamajigs or lock your fist onto an enemy to electrocute their balls off. There's a lot of variety in enemy types. Some will even protect each other. So figuring out the patterns and how to get rid of them with each power-up will make you better and better at this game. The least versatile one is the yellow can. It just gives you extra height. And yeah, you can just fly past these enemies, but the game gives you a reason to fight them. Bringing me to...
Reason 3!
The combo system. Okay, now hold on to your pants. I'm going to be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. Scary, I know. We'll get through this together, okay? I think at some point during development, the designers of Sonic Heroes realized that running past enemies makes the game super short. So, they lock your frickin' progress unless you kill everything on the screen.
Oh, there, that'll teach those darn players to actually play our game and not skip our intricately designed fights. What do you mean it's boring? Just have more enemies then. More enemies equals more funemies, ha 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 hoo! This is what you get for not supporting the Dreamcast!
Look, even if your combat is solid, you need a reason to fight these enemies, beyond allowing the player to get back to the more fun part of the game. And guess what? Rayman 3 has a flipping fantastic point system. The more points you get, the more silly minigames you unlock. You even get a happy stamp on the level select screen. Haha, yeah, I live for approval, I'll take it. And if you get enough points on the hardest level of all, you even get to see some creatures that went unused in the final game. Like, that's so flipping cool, like this blew my mind as a kid. So how do you get these points anyway? Well, you collect the usual shiny things, in combination with fighting and picking up power-ups. This is the glue that sticks it all together into a wonderful flow as smooth as a shark's skin. Now, after some experimenting, you figure out that a power-up doubles your score, and beating enemies in quick succession gets you a huge amount of points. It even extends the time that your combo meter is active. I like the replay value this adds. You can experiment a lot with finding the most efficient route through the level to keep the combo meter going for a long time. Speaking of that combo meter...
Reason 4!
Dot. Or heads-up display, as the cool kids call it. An often overlooked part of game design is adding these visual elements that let the player know what they can and cannot interact with, and how they're doing in the game so far. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, all these floating bars and numbers can take you out of the experience a bit. I don't like this. I don't want to feel like I'm playing a video game. I want to feel like I'm playing a video game. God! Rayman 3 does a good job at this. The score meter is clear and fits the construction aesthetic of the Hoodlums, and the health bar also shows your power-up duration. It's good stuff, but nothing groundbreaking. But then we have the reticle. Sorry, I can't pronounce this right. I have a weird medical condition known as being Dutch. Living below sea level gives you a horrible accent. You want to see my gills? The reticle has a very bold design that surprisingly doesn't break the immersion. Targeting an enemy is like locking onto something in Zelda. You can strafe from left to right, even roll around, although it doesn't do much. And this dumb circle right here is absolutely genius! Yeah, it may look like a YouTuber's clickbait thumbnail. Can you imagine? But it gives the player so much information. Like, which goon am I aiming at? Is this sucker close enough for me to slap the shit out of them? What's the angle of my shots? Are my shots strong enough to hit them? It's so simple, but so effective and clean. Fun fact, it was originally going to look a lot more like the rest of the HUD. I presume they had to change it at some point because it wasn't clear enough to players. No matter which level you're in, where you're standing, or what chaotic mess is going on, you can always rely on this little thing to tell you how to most accurately obliterate somebody. It's a tool I'm sure we all wish we had in real life. Ugh, tell me about it. Anyway, all that senseless violence brings me to...
Reason 5!
This is not a real reason. I deceived you. Let this be a lesson. This is what happens when you trust people. Now, lastly, I actually want to talk about how Rayman 3's combat still isn't perfect. Maybe it's because I've played the game too many times, but I've never felt like the combat lives up to its full potential or offers a big challenge. Now, by the end of the game, you have so much health that you don't even need to care about optimizing your combat anymore. And that's a shame, because the final boss is one of the coolest fights in the game. Like, you're switching between power-ups, you're dodging lasers, you're kicking ass, and it's over. It's just platforming now. And it ends with a turret section. Okay, cool. Even when you're fighting bigger groups of enemies, these groups usually only consist of enemies that shoot at you from a distance. Now, having a moving floor or a sticky floor where you can jump, or some melee enemies thrown in the mix, that could be fun. Or hey, give the yellow helicopter power-up a combat function, like blowing away swarms of enemies with wind or something. I also wish that some of the ideas that were later used in the Rayman Raving Rabbids prototype were implemented in this, like picking up an enemy and spinning them around to other enemies, or picking up items. Okay, I know this is turning into a bit of a summary of silly ideas I have, but come on, you can do so much with this. Like, I remember during my first playthrough of the game ever, like, I discovered you can hide behind Glowbox and he just takes the hits for you. Why not make that an actual mechanic at some point? Like, that's hilarious. God, speaking of mechanics, do you remember when I first talked about the rolling in this video? Yeah. There's a roll move in this game, and it's very funny actually. It feels like a last-minute addition. The camera doesn't even properly keep up with you. If it was some kind of dodge that slowed down time, like in Kirby, or if it made you briefly invincible and then left you open for a second, that could be so cool, but nope. It's just a roll. Moves you around slightly faster. Jumping over bullets is easier and more versatile, so this really feels like a missed opportunity. But there is also a kick. And it is equally useless. You could say that it's a good thing that they didn't overcomplicate the combats, and yeah, I feel like that's true. Like, combat works well when it's easy to do on a surface level, but fun to master on a deeper level. Mastering combat in Rayman 3 though, it takes you like half a playthrough. Though it stays fun and fresh because of the sheer variety in enemies and boss encounters. There's always some different context or item to interact with, and oh hey, maybe that's reason 5, sure. Let's do that. You can no longer sue me for false advertising. I know, I was looking forward to meeting you in court too, but hey, come on, maybe I'll slip up in the next video, you never know. And there it is, that's why the game is good. I'm hoping this will be interesting to fans of 3D platformers, you know, to show how much thought and care was put into a game like this. And hey, maybe it gives you some inspiration or tips for how to make your own game's combat better. What do you think? Was this interesting? Like my previous Banjo video, it was more of a deep dive into a specific part of a game rather than a full-on review. I like being able to go into specifics without making a 3-hour analysis of everything that a game has to offer, so, but you know, maybe a full review could be fun too someday. Fuck! They found me! Or maybe it's the mailman? You came back. After all this time, after everything I said, I didn't think you still cared.
I never stopped caring, baby girl.
He's in position! Airstrike now!
What the hell?
Love you too.